websites to show that we have all the parents coming in on Friday, so like
Oh,
to have
It's
all the
administrators
websites
tomorrow.
and administrators are coming tomorrow.
busy time.
Yeah, just all of 1 week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is going to be it for tonight. We have two people who are not going to be able to be here tonight for various reasons. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. And to be honest, the bulk of tonight is really, as was on the original syllabus, is mainly sort of an open lab night. So I find we get about 4 or 5 weeks in, and that's right about when things start to pile up or get behind a little bit or questions start to come up. So I just wanted to give a moment for you guys to use to either get caught up on work from the previous week or to get started on the work for next week or whatever. So what I do want to do tonight, I do want to follow up a little bit from last week, particularly the concept versus fact thing, because there were some questions there, and I did see in the forums there were a couple of light bulbs that went off, and most of them were along the lines of, I was just overthinking this.
And that was me.
Which I think can be, interesting that we're talking about concepts and to overthink a concept. So I just want to follow up a little bit on that, and also just in general, especially with Powtoon, if there are any sort of remaining technical questions or issues that you're still trying to work out, because what I do want to go over tonight is the actual Powtoon project, which you will have we have class next week. And you will have some lab time next week as well. The following week is the week that we are not having class. That's the week that I'm involved with production at my school. So that I put on the syllabus that's the week that the Powtoon project is due. But honestly, because we're not having class that week, it's really, by the week after. So. Okay. Starting tonight, we have 3 weeks for this Powtoon project, and the Powtoon is. We're only looking at a scope of about 2 minutes long, so it's not like this is going to be a half-hour animation you're creating. So I think 3 weeks with one of those weeks not even being a week where we're meeting and you just have the week to work on it, plus some lab time should be helpful. Yeah, and then just talk a little bit about the homework for next week, and then like I said, I will finish up way early. And then I will just stay as long as anyone needs me to stay tonight. If you want to get some work done here. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've said that in the past, and then had people that stay and end up staying like an hour later than we would normally have stayed.
So are you like us? We have to stay till all the kids are gone. Do you have to stay till we're all gone?
I actually need to officially double check that with Dr. Beck, because I don't know what the full story is on that.
Do you think if we have some lab time, can you maybe, because you saw what we submitted first, can you give us feedback hey, you're going in the right direction, or
for the Powtoons or for
those little mini projects that we
Yeah, I haven't gone into the depth. As of this morning, there were a bunch of people who had not submitted this week, so I kind of hadn't gone through.
I forgot.
Yeah, when I got here, I realized I didn't do the 520. I did that as soon as I said
Yeah. So I haven't really had a chance to go through. But if you want me to look at something, I can absolutely.
We have a little bit of lab time, and then you'll do that. If I think I'm awesome, and you're like, oh, honey, and I don't want to get too far into my project, and you'd be like. We need to totally revamp this. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. If you want me to take a look, I can absolutely do that. So.
Well, I am too. I tell my students, you're doing great, and they're like, we're not, and I'm like, I am that child sometimes.
Yeah.
I apologize.
All right. So, anyways, the sort of the first thing is this idea of concepts and facts versus concepts, and I think reading through the forum posts and so on, I think it looked like most people at least got there eventually. I think going through it, I did see very clearly some people saying, "Oh, okay, now I get it." And it is, the hard thing is that the dividing line between fact and concept is a blurry one. And if you look at resources or look online or look at definitions, usually the distinction revolves around abstraction is the word that shows up a lot, where they will say a fact kind of exists with no abstraction needed. It is a thing that is. You don't have to interpret it. You don't have to assemble anything to have it. So, like 2 + 2 = 4 is a fact. And then concepts usually involve some level of abstraction, meaning that it's not necessarily a thing you can hold or point at, but it's an idea that requires you to put some other pieces of information together in terms of understanding it or getting a grasp of what it is. So, a rectangle has 4 sides, I would say, is a fact. A concept would be more about, like a I picked math and I'm not a math teacher, but like a closed space or, closed objects that they require, sides, and the sides have to connect and the space can't be open to the outside. And
would it be like
So-
perimeter of a, would that still perimeter of a rectangle, would that be a concept, or that would still be a fact?
Perimeter, the idea of a perimeter could, I think, start to head into concept,
Okay.
because to get a perimeter, you would need to know what a side or an
yes,
edge is. You need to understand sort of basic geometry, and that a geometry has a border to it. And so I think that kind of a thing would start to
Okay.
go into the idea of concept.
That's a blurry line you're talking about.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. There's
Because I teach kindergarten, and I
I have
was
no idea.
almost everything seems like it's a concept to them because they have no schema for it. Like I use counting cardinality for my concept because you really have to. They don't know what half of my kids can't count to 5, or they go 1, 4. They don't get the value of the number.
right.
So I was a little, and I was talking to another kindergarten teacher, and we had decided amongst ourselves that no, that's a concept. Counting and cardinality is a concept.
Yeah.
But I hadn't talked to you yet because, like I said, I was away this weekend. I did it all last night, and I was curious. Would you consider that a concept?
Yeah, because so to kind of go off of that, like I don't have one, but like this is a number 1. If you draw a number 1 on the board and you say this is a number 1, that would be a fact. Like it's just a definition. You just look at this shape. That shape's name is number 1. The concept would be whatever the word, the cardinality, that there's an order to them, that they represent amounts, that you can have these things and that is 3, and you can have these totally different things, but that's also 3. That the idea of amount would be a concept. So yeah, I think from a music teacher standpoint, again, I can put a note up on the board and say this is a half note. All right, they don't need to know anything else. They just need to memorize that when they see that shape, they call it a half note. But if we get into the concept of rhythm and meter and how many beats does this symbol represent within this piece of music, so rhythm would be the concept. That half note is sort of a fact that exists that then goes into the concept of rhythm, or is a way that we use to express rhythm. So that would be kind of the same as numbers and cardinality. There's a
value.
Or value, yeah.
There's a lot of concepts within the concept.
Right. And the facts are easy because they don't really require, that's the point of a fact, is it doesn't require interpretation. It is rote memorization. Whereas when something starts to get into a concept, it falls out of that rote memorization, and you, at that point, because there is abstraction, you are asking your learners to assemble some sort of knowledge together in order to be able to comprehend what this concept is. So does that help at all?
So let me just
Yes,
ask.
please.
So what I posted, which was the Google form thing, was a fact then, right? Because I did
What a Google form is a fact, but what you do all different things with them, and
Yeah,
wouldn't that be?
but the way I
Concept or
wrote
no?
it wasn't like, I didn't put like, as part of the identification, I put like a cloud-based, survey application. So, but I titled it Google Forms, so I think it read more as a fact.
Application could be a concept.
Yeah, the concept would be sort of the use of a form. Like,
Yeah,
what does
that's
a
kinda what
form
I'm thinking.
do?
Yeah.
Like, it is a tool for collecting data for, that it can, people can submit things through it. A form just as a thing, I think, that's a tricky one to say. But I would say a form is probably a fact. Like, you would teach, okay, if you have something that's got a bunch of things where people can put stuff in, we call that thing a form, right? But to understand, how would you use a form? Why would you use a form? What does it actually do? That would be kind of the conceptual side of
Like if you just put in the
forms.
word application though, I feel like that's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the use of,
The different
the
ways
use
you
of
can
forms
use it.
or a form's functionality
So
or
if I
something like
had
that.
Written it a little differently.
Yeah, maybe just a little clearer.
Yeah,
Again,
I
it's
kept going around and around, and then I was just like, oh my God, I can't decide, I'm just gonna submit it, I can't. Because I was spending so much time on it, and then I was like, this is ridiculous, why can't I figure this out?
yeah, and then sometimes if you feel like you're sitting on one of those dividing line cases, sometimes just throwing it out and going in a completely different direction and just saying, okay, I'm just going to go for the easy thing, like, so like,
I did the exact same thing. I thought about this way.
yeah, so like the sun would be a fact, like this is the sun,
Yeah.
but like, how does a sun? I'm sorry, I'm going to take this because it's my daughter, real quick. Sorry. Yes.
That's okay, Taylor. I'm looking back and my fact that
Your
I put
Marcus.
is not a fact. It's like a concept.
I didn't get to say hi.
Hi, how are
It
you?
was just, it was
Hi.
the only one I could
I got a haircut right before.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
I'm just
Like,
exhausted.
I was like,
You're,
I was like,
you
Okay.
yours makes total sense to me.
Okay.
Yours
That's my
and
kid.
mine-
It's entirely up to you.
I
You're
mean,
just going to be there on
sign
your own.
language,
Right, because
Or
mine
the
was
teachers
just
taught
like-
them
Okay,
that, so that we're not
it's your
having
call
conversation,
if you don't think it's going to be
that's
useful for you to
myself.
go.
It's it's a quiet way of
All right,
saying
bye.
me too. It's kind of cool.
All right.
Yeah, I do.
No
I'm
crisis.
here. I like it.
She has a Girl Scout meeting tonight, and she's trying to figure out if she's supposed to go or not.
My
Does
fifth
she want
graders
to
love
go?
when I answer this.
They're working on their silver projects, and the person who's her partner is not going to be there tonight. So she's wondering if it's going to make sense for her to go if her partner's not going to be there. So, anyways, she does sell cookies. I think their cookie selling is done for this year. But,
Yeah, we've already ordered them.
yeah. So yeah. So anyway, so is that?
So you
Yeah, that's
said.
helpful.
Oh, so like the sun. So this is the sun. That would be a fact. Like you
Right.
see that. But say like, how does the sun work? Like
Provide
fusion
energy.
or is it fission? No, it's fusion. The sun does fusion, not fission. That would be the concept. Or how does the sun create light or heat? Or that would be the conceptual side. Sort of how does it work or how does it do what it does? Like a car has four wheels is a fact. But, how does the steering work or how does the transmission work or how does the rear differential work? Those would be more conceptual because to understand a differential, you need to understand a bunch of different things about mechanics and about gears and about forces and things like that. So it's kind of, I guess one measuring stick you could use is if it requires you to assemble other pieces of knowledge in order to really understand that thing, then that kind of takes it into the realm of a concept. Whereas if it's sort of a standalone single entity, this is this, then that's more a fact.
Yeah, I just couldn't get my head around that. I thought I got it, and then when I started writing, I'm like, no, this can't be right.
And she came down to me and I said, just send it in. He'll tell you if it's right or
Yeah.
not.
I was
At that
like,
point, it's
I mean,
kind
is
of
it
like,
is it absolutely vital that like we need to be able to differentiate, or is it just like
It's, I mean, a part of it is just sort of that going through the exercise of understanding that they're taught in different ways, and you're going to want to approach them in different ways. When we get into the games, some of the games are going to be about teaching facts, and other games are going to be more along the lines of teaching concepts. So I think having an understanding of how these two things divide and kind of how you approach them differently from an educational standpoint is useful, because that will then apply to the game projects we do and to other things. So I think it's something that I don't remember ever being taught explicitly to become a teacher, but I think it would have been useful, because now as I teach what I teach, I can kind of set aside in my mind, okay, here are the factual things I need to get through, and I'm going to be approaching those in sort of this set of ways. These are more conceptual things. I need to approach those differently. Like, I can't just give a definition for a concept and expect them to have it.
So I have a question about the gaming. So are these as we go into creating games, in your experience, are these games that we can actually, like Moodles, we can't, Powtoon, we can't, we don't have is this another one of those, you're gonna learn how to do this, but you probably won't be able to necessarily use your game? mean, you might not be able to use
People
the
have
concept,
actually
they could change the
used their
topic.
games. I mean, the trickiest thing with that is because it's a group project.
Yeah.
Generally speaking,
You might
the
have to
topic applies really well to one of the people in the
Right,
group,
but
because
you
it was sort
could-
of their
you could
topic.
change it to your topic
Yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. It's
I guess what I'm saying, are there applications that we could actually like,
people have
do?
actually kept. I give you the option at the end of the course of whether you want to keep the game or not, and some people want to keep them because they actually want to use them in their classrooms.
Yeah,
It relates to what they're doing. So that's entirely up to
But
you.
they're all digital.
No, these are physical. Most of them are physical. Like, here's a
Games.
board, here's cards, here's a
Oh.
playing thing, here's a.
Oh,
We're gonna incorporate some technology into it.
I'm glad I asked that then.
But yes,
Okay.
it is. Most of them are much more along the lines of like an actual like.
Okay.
How does the digital part play into it?
We a lot of times we'll use it. Oftentimes using Powtoon as like an aid to the delivery of the rules for the game. So in addition to maybe giving a paper copy of the rules, there might also be a video of the rules. Some groups have actually incorporated like short videos or things into the gameplay, where at this point in the game, okay, watch this thing,
Oh, okay.
So it can be incorporated in a number of different ways. And we're going to use technology in the planning of it as well. We're going to be flow charting these games and things like that as well. So yes, you've been patiently raising your hand.
Oh, that's okay. So if we maybe were slightly misguided in what I thought was a fact, is now really apparent to me that it's a concept. Do you want me to go back and redo it and make my first Powtoon into like a fact thing?
No,
Okay,
you're fine.
okay.
It's
Because congruent triangles is not a fact.
It's a learning
That is
experience.
now I'm like, to me it was very factual. This is what they are. But as you're talking, there are like. there's
right.
a
Now the
lot
fact would
of
be
stuff.
triangle.
Yes.
What
Well,
is
that's
a
why I'm
tri-
like,
what is
I
a
could have done
triangle?
What is-
triangle. I
Yeah.
could have done that, I
The-
could have, or a right triangle.
Right. But it's really triangle was good. The congruency would be the concept. So you could teach a fact. These are triangles. It
But
has
you need the triangle to get to the congruent, so that's where I'm like, oh,
right.
that is so not following
And
the rules.
congruency also requires them to understand
Oh, a lot of things.
similarity and all that kind of all those other things that they need to know as well. So
Here, I thought I
So.
crossed it off first.
it's all good. See, the light bulb goes off now. It's all good. So
All right, so you don't need us to go back.
No.
It was a
Again,
concept to change
the
that. Okay.
I try to, as much as possible, and maybe you figured this out, sort of kill multiple birds with one stone, because I hate duplicating work for the purpose of duplicating work. So if I can have something where you are practicing using Powtoon and at the same time are also thinking about an educational concept or theory or approach, then it just kind of brings two things together and helps work both of those things at the same time instead of giving you two separate projects separately. I mean,
You're not actually like grading our Powtoons, but you're kind of looking to see that we did it and we put some effort in. into it.
Yeah,
checking
and
that
mainly
box.
also, you know, if you have, as you go through, I mean, you guys so far have been really good about asking, you know, you run up against that wall or you're wondering, how do I do this thing? So by giving you a focus and letting you work through the process, then you also tend to discover on your own where the roadblocks are, and either you figure out how to address them on your own, which is awesome, or you ask the questions, and then that also is great because then it lets me see where we are. But because you have shared them with me, it does give me the chance to then also go in and look at the results and kind of see where folks are.
So as we move into the further ones, we're changing the subject, or are we adding to what we already have, or either way?
For, you mean for the Powtoon?
Yeah, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, you may decide to build on
Build
one
on
of the
what you
things
already
you've
have.
already started using if you want to, or you may just start over and say,
Okay,
I just
something
want to kind of clean slate and just kind of design this thing from the ground up now that I have an idea of what Powtoon does
Yeah.
and what its limitations are and things like that. So, all right, so yes, indeed, that's actually kind of a nice segue because the next thing is to talk about the Powtoon project. So this, since we're using this ADDIE sort of model, I do have there is a document that I'll point out in a little bit that is a Word document that's a template for you to use to do the planning portion of your Powtoon. And it's not like I'm going to require you to submit that and have me look through it and then tell you you're okay to start building your Powtoon. But it will benefit you to go through the design phase first, because I'm tight. To go through the design phase first before you start trying to execute in Powtoon, because it'll just help the workflow be a little better. So this is contained, these pages I think are contained, at least the rubric is contained in the course syllabus, but I also included it here as a standalone, and then like I said, this is also included in the Word document, so you'll have all this information in multiple places. So this is the first of 3 of our major projects. It's about creating an effective instructional animated video using Powtoon. Step 1 is the design plan, so you know what you're trying to achieve. And then once you've done that, you'll use Powtoon to actually turn it into a reality. There are some required elements, but I try to keep those to a minimum because I want you to be able to feel like you're really driving the builds based on what it is you're trying to do and getting there the most effective way. So I'd say in the end, the best choice for content is the one that will most effectively support your goals. So if you have questions about, well, do I need to include or should I really put in if it's not spelled out in my requirements, my answer will usually be some version of, if it supports what you're doing, then use it, and if it doesn't, then don't. I guess that's an extension of just because a program gives you 20 transitions, doesn't mean you should be using 20 transitions. You know, if one is all you need or none is all you need, then that's what you should do. And that's maybe another through lesson through this course and the other courses I teach is to not use technology needlessly just because it's available. So I want you to become intelligent and thoughtful and deliberate users of technology. So unless it's something, and the requirements are usually there just to kind of help to standardize the project, so we don't have people that are doing 3 slides and it's 30 seconds long and someone else is doing 50 slides and it's a half an hour long. So here are the requirements. Completed ID plan document, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. I've given you a Word template. You're basically just going to be filling in your answers and your thoughts on that. And then that Word document, there is a Moodle assignment that you will submit the finished document to. I say 6 slides minimum, which now that you've done a couple of projects that are 3 or 4 or 5 slides long, 6 shouldn't seem like that insane a requirement. First slide should function as some kind of an introduction. Think of it as an advanced organizer or whatever you want to call it, a pre-planner, just something that will, as somebody's watching the video, hey, today let's learn about the sun. So that's already one of your 6 slides taken care of. Overall length somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes. So don't go crazy. But again, if you figure slides are going to be between 10 and 20 seconds, that's somewhere between 4, 5, 6 slides per minute. So it'll fill up pretty quickly. I do want you to use at least one character, because in Powtoon, that's kind of one of the main reasons you would use Powtoon, is to get those characters. The personalization principle is something you're going to know a lot more about over the next week, because that's one of the main homework assignments next week. We've got a chapter about the personalization principle and why it's important and why it's useful, and how it applies. So you can certainly use more than one character, but kind of think about either animating yourself or having a kind of a narrator go along. I do want you to use voiceovers, so it shouldn't just be images. That is supported through research that says that people do tend to learn better especially if text is supported with voice at the same time, or if images are supported with narration. You can decide if you wanted to do the whole Powtoon approach or do it the per slide approach. It doesn't really matter. And I do want to make sure there's a music track in there. Again, I'm not, that should not be probably the main focus of things, but I want to have that in there so that you have the experience of getting that kind of content into a video and making sure that it doesn't get in the way. So it's more about practicing how to use it without it being distracting. Yes.
Perhaps an ignorant question. Do all PCs come with a microphone? Is it or is that gonna be something that we have to make sure?
Anymore, I think that is almost always the case.
So
I mean,
with
every
these,
single one of these do. Every single laptop you would get from Central does. I know every device we've put in all of our students' hands in our school district does, and those are little $200 convertible laptop things.
When we did that class at synchronously, were you on the school one?
Ironically, because I had the birthday sung to me, I never spoke at all that whole day. I was also shy. So I don't know, I never tested it out, but I assume I could have spoken if I wished to have.
I would, yeah. I mean, did it have a camera?
I was able to do the camera, yeah.
Then it has a microphone, yeah.
Okay, so I guess during that part, for some reason the PCs at school don't have them because they're old, then I can always make sure I use the one from Central.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking through all the pieces of hardware I currently have available to me, and I don't think a single one of them doesn't have a microphone built in.
Okay.
So
I've never.
We were talking about if we stayed at school. Last night we had a meeting and was gonna stay at school for the class, and she was saying, I don't know if we can get WebEx downloaded.
Oh, because if you don't have administrative to download the desktop client, you can still do it through the website. You're just a little limited in terms of yeah.
Okay, so
yes.
you're right.
Did you give us any websites last week that I just forgot about in terms of getting free sound clips?
Not outside of now. Powtoon does have a lot of stuff in it. Oh, you want sound effects or?
That was
that
that wasn't great.
And that was that those sound effects were part of the enter and exit animations. So that was something you could, if you had something fly in or drop in or pop in or whatever, you had an option of adding a sound to that.
Oh, that's why.
Okay. But the chirp is deceiving because the chirp goes. It's not like.
It's not a bird
I
chirping.
It was a bird chirping.
Yeah. One thing, because Powtoon doesn't give you, they don't really give you a timeline for audio.
Okay.
They give you a timeline for visual objects, but not for audio. So you don't really have the option. It would be nice to have of having at third second in, I want to have this sound effect happen.
Okay.
They might get there. That might be. I mean, I can't imagine it would be that hard for them to just create an object that was a sound object that you could then put on the timeline just like you would a visual object. But, that's...
All right, so then I couldn't figure it out because it didn't exist.
Right, yeah. At this point, in terms of sound, you can have a soundtrack running through your whole project, you can have a voiceover running through your whole project, or you can have a
Even the per
voiceover.
slide though, you can't shorten it.
Right, you can't.
Less than 20
Um,
seconds or something.
Right, you can't go longer than 20 seconds, and the voiceover will start with the beginning of the slide. So you can't tell it like wait 5 seconds and then start talking.
Right.
So if you want to do that, you have to kind of time it out, and when you record it,
It's almost like you gotta practice.
Like
Wait
doing a-
5
like doing a
seconds.
pause
Make
in
sure,
music.
'cause
Yeah.
that's
A
And-
rest,
when-
sort of.
right,
So
yeah.
when
So
talking stopped,
so sometimes like if you have a stopwatch, like
how long it takes you to say it.
tell your slide to play, and kind of watch it and time it. Well, and you'll
I
know
wanted
from the
to, like,
timeline
stop
where.
the music before the end of the slide.
Yeah, and the only way you could do that would be to pre-edit the music in another program so that it's only a certain number of seconds long, and then bring that in as if it was your voiceover. And then it would play and stop, and you'd have blank space. But that again takes a little bit of
You
extra.
can't really edit the
planning.
volume like to make it much softer than
You can change the volume. You can't have the volume change while it's playing. Like you can set a volume for a
Most
sound.
likely your
So
voice, I don't mind, is going to be much louder than the music. Like it's
The
going to
music,
be
you can
back-
make it really loud.
right. So here I'll go into a real quick project here. Is for each of those audio elements when you're down here, they give you
Oh, they do.
they give you a volume slider. So you can, but once you've set it, it'll stay at that level. So again, you couldn't have like 5 seconds of talking, and then as soon as the talking's done, have the music get louder, kind of a thing. You can't like mix those levels in real time. That's audio automation, but you do have the option of changing the overall
I mean, it
volume.
just depends on your goal, but for the most part, like the music is really just kind of a background that's like.
If you have a project that's got no talking, then the music is the feature, and a lot of times the music in that case is really important because it may be the thing that's keeping kind of the energy of the slideshow going. But if you have voices, those voices need to be the featured thing, and so you just need to be really careful not to have the music step on the voices at all. So
That doesn't seem like the most daunting aspect.
yeah, the audio
Yeah.
part. Yeah, I wish
Matching it up with your video.
being a sound
Me
person,
too.
that's what I struggle with the most in Powtoon because I want to have a lot more control over my audio than they give me. But-
Don't you think it's easier if you just, and maybe you think not, but isn't it easier just to do your audio for one slide and then do it for the next slide because you have more
Seems like so.
control opposed to trying to do it all and then you're trying to sync your slides to that?
Yeah,
seems
it's.
like
I mean, like I
everybody
said
wants-
last week, there's sort of a main pro and con for both approaches. The breaking it up definitely gives you more control, and it's easier to synchronize everything. What you sometimes lose is the continuity from slide to slide.
Oh, in terms of the audio?
In terms of the audio, unless you're being really careful to stay the same distance away and talk the same way and all that, you can sometimes get differences in voice quality from one slide to the next, and sometimes if there's some background noise when one slide's done and the audio's done, that background noise goes away, and then the next slide comes up and that background noise. Sometimes that can be almost more distracting than just having a noise that's there all the time. So there is a trade-off for both approaches. In terms of sequencing, yes, going slide by slide by slide is definitely easier. If you're going to do that, just be aware that you have to be a little more careful about continuity issues in terms of keeping it consistent. And sometimes what you can do there is, even if you don't have your slides done, is to start by going in and even just creating blank slides, however many you need, and record all the voiceovers all at once. Just go from one slide, record the voiceover, next slide, record the voiceover. And then once all those are in there, then you can actually kind of build your slide to the voiceover in terms of timing and length and all that kind of stuff. And then that way you've also know you've done all of the voiceovers kind of in one take, and they should all be as similar as you can get them to each other.
All right.
All right, so Yeah, so back to this. So that's really, that's the requirements. I mean, that's as far as I'm gonna go. Beyond that, I'm not saying, oh, you've got to use X number of props, or you've got to have a movie in it, or you've got to use, 10 different fonts. Mr. or Dr. Abed would kill me if I asked for that. So it's really just, the main focus is on what is it you're trying to teach through this video, and then using the tools that Powtoon gives you in order to make that video happen.
Are there any guidelines on what to teach, or that's just up to us?
No, that's, I mean, this, in terms of the instructional design, so here I've got it here. So this is basically the document you're going to get. So it's the same sort of approach of the ADDIE, of the analyze and design and develop and so on. So in terms of analysis, I like to start every educational thing with a problem. I mean, if there's no problem to solve, we don't need to teach somebody. I mean, essentially they already know it. So what is the problem you're trying to solve? So what's a thing that your students struggle with, or that a student struggles with, or that your kids struggle with, or your spouse struggles with? I don't know, something. So you're trying to solve a problem. This is not what you need, just what is the problem, right? Then the need is what you feel you need in order to address the problem. The need isn't, oh, my students need to be able to. The need is, in order to solve this problem, I need a, or my students need a. Since this is a Powtoon, this is a bit artificial because I'm saying that the need is, I need a Powtoon that, I've been dying to create a Powtoon that, that somehow addresses that problem. Okay, so there's those two. Audience is always very important. As we know, we've got everything from kindergarten to adult ed teachers in here, and that's obviously going to change the way you talk, the way the topic is approached, whether you want it to be more cartoony, whether you want it to be more realistic. So anything that you think is going to be relevant to shaping your Powtoon in terms of your audience. If you're not actually creating this for an actual classroom, then just make something up. Have something in mind so that you've got a target as you create. The learning outcomes, so here was their problem and the need. Then the learning outcomes is, the student will be able to, or the students will know, so on. And then the content, this is really the specifics of what's going in there. If you've got, I mean, not that we need to get too in depth on this, but if you are really into the standards that you teach and want to connect it to a particular standard, you may, but it may also just be, as part of a unit on such and such, we're covering this kind of a thing. So that's your analyze piece. And then the design piece for this is really just three. First one is on segmentation, and this applies to Powtoon because the segmentation is your slides. So essentially what you're doing here is figuring out, okay, with this problem, how do I see setting up a series of slides that will address that problem? So you want to just kind of figure that out. How many slides? How do you sort of plan on breaking them up? The actual slide plan. So this is actually starting to get a little bit into the develop side, but here's where you're actually going to list out, I give a number 1, but if you're going to have 8 slides, you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then just give a quick description. And this is just to help you. So as you're going from slide to slide to slide, you know what you're trying to achieve on each of the slides. And then I give you a space for your script. And I strongly encourage, I know there's some people who like to just go off the cuff on these sorts of things and just sort of make it up as they go. But I do strongly encourage you to script out ahead of time what you're going to say, because none of us sounds as intelligent when we record ourselves as we think we are, myself included. I know I say and things like that way too much. So having something written out is just going to help you be more consistent and more efficient when it comes time to record those voiceovers. And again, if you want to do that as one long continuous voiceover, or if you want to break it up by slide, if you're going to break it up by slide, just in your script, as I say, just kind of break it up. Here's slide 1's text, here's slide 2's text. But remember, the longest a slide can be is 20 seconds. So make sure as you're scripting that you're keeping an eye on a stopwatch so that you know you're not going over 20 seconds.
So obviously, though, the slide should come before the script. Like, you write the text afterwards to fit what you have read.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you should have a plan of what you're doing and how you're dividing it up. So then you know on each slide what it is you're talking about. I mean, you can have a rough idea of your overall script. I mean, obviously, as you're thinking about your topic, you're going to be having an idea of what you're going to be saying about the topic. But for actually writing your actual script, you're going to want to know how many slides am I trying to fill up? How have I decided to break up the content so that you know what you're going to be saying on each slide.
So I have a question. It says problem, and so when I'm thinking about like making a Powtoon that I would actually like to use is something new that I'm teaching them about that I would normally do in a boring way that I could do in a Powtoon. Is that a problem?
Yeah, I mean, that's an engagement issue, which is a big topic for this class, both between animation and between gaming. That whole idea of motivation and engagement.
I mean, it's also the concept's complicated, so I mean, I think it would be.
But you could state the problem in the context of, you know, my students are having difficulty being motivated to learn about blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And therefore, rather than just teaching it normally, my need is I need something more engaging than just a lecture or a handout.
Okay.
I could say I'm going to use a Powtoon because that's going to engage my students better than another mode might, or something like those lines. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, so like I said, this piece of it is if you're in the Moodle, there is it's Powtoon Instructional Video Project is the actual assignment, and in it is the downloadable document. You may not want to download it right now because it's going to download it to these computers, and unless you have a way of then sending that file to yourself or sharing it somewhere. But this is the template of what you were just looking at. So you would download this, do your planning in that document, save it. I ask you to rename it last name, first initial, and then Powtoon ID. And then when it's complete, you come back to here and you would be submitting it, and all you're doing for your submission is just attaching that finished Word document and then turning it in, and then it'll show up here as a submitted assignment. So that's how you would actually do it, and where you get the actual template from is in the assignment itself right there. And that's a clickable link.
So that's part of homework?
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess this is a little ahead here, but that's okay. So in terms of the timeline for this project, the main focus, I think, this week should be on the ID plan. Mm-hmm. But as you saw, that may not take a ton of time. I mean, we're not looking here at enormous hour-long videos. So certainly, if you get through the ID plan and want to start actually working on the Powtoon itself this week, be my guest. But I'm thinking kind of in a rough timeline way that if the ID plans can be done by next week, so that's kind of the official homework for this week is to do the planning. Then, as I said, I put on the syllabus that the actual Powtoon was due the week after, but that's the week we don't have class. So, and I'm not really going to have something else for you to do that week. It's not like I'm taking that class online or something. That's just that class isn't happening. So you will really have then 2 weeks to actually execute the Powtoon and submit it. And I would say, actually, I just realized I didn't edit that. I should have. There was that big red thing on there saying paste the finished URL of your Powtoon here. You can actually ignore that. Because that was before Powtoon gave us that option of the pull-down menu and sending it to me that way. It used to be that you had to finish the project, and then that would produce a shareable link, and then they would have to give me the link, and then I would click on the link, and it would give me access to their project, and it was this whole thing. So you don't actually have to do that. To actually turn in the Powtoon itself, you just turn on that switch on the Powtoon page. and maybe if I get a
So
chance.
when is it due?
So
When's
the
the
ID would be
Next week, yeah.
next week, and then it would really be, I think officially it was the 26th is when it said on the syllabus, but we really have, March 4th, which is the next time we would be meeting in person. Just aim to have them done by then. Again, if you need a little more time than that, you need a little more time than that. But at that point, starting on March 4th, we're really going to start transitioning into the game projects. So I kind of want to have the Powtoon piece wrapped up by then, if at all possible. So, but hopefully, a 2 to 5 minute Powtoon is doable in 3 weeks, especially considering, again, 2 of those weeks are essentially just work weeks. You're not going to have much else to do in terms of this class.
Just so we don't go crazy for you, when you're looking at the rubric and it says the IB plan is complete and shows a deep understanding of the IB process, you don't want us to do paragraphs or like paragraphs upon paragraphs upon paragraphs.
No. Yeah, no, it's.
Sometimes have 2 to 3 sentences, or I just read that out.
Yeah, I honestly, let me pull it up here to see what the actual wording of the rubric is. Some of this rubric language I inherited from my predecessor. I do try, so let's see, this shows an understand,
Well, the deep understanding is like if you want us to go
How
into
do you show a deep understanding?
significant analysis, that's fine, like I'll put extra in. If you want us to do what we've been doing, then
Yeah, I mean, for me, a deep understanding doesn't necessarily indicate volume of information. It's sort of that you're showing evidence that you've really considered. If you're talking about your audience and you told me who the audience is and what their ages are and kind of what their makeup is and everything. I mean, that's proficient. You've analyzed who they are. But if somebody goes in and also is identifying some specific issues that are really going to impact how they want to shape their Powtoon, it's things like that. But it's.
So we already submitted an ID plan for our Moodle, right?
Yes, well,
So would we have
that's
gotten-
in process. We've done 2 phases of that,
Right,
so that one's
would we have gotten feedback on that if we were completely off base already?
not yet. That's
Okay.
part of my plan this coming week, because again, I still don't have. Not everybody has gotten their phase 2 in yet.
Oh, I don't have my. Is that due?
That was
Phase 2 segmentation. Oh no, I didn't.
that. Yeah, so
Okay.
there was still a few more I was waiting to
Yeah.
come in on
Okay.
that. So I was kind of waiting
So
to
you can see
get
the whole-
sort of everything in from everybody. So my hope over this next week is to look at those, and again, mainly if I see if people are way off base or if I really feel like I need to step in and make a suggestion.
Yeah, okay.
I think mine's
So.
way off.
and I didn't
We'll
mean
talk about that later.
Okay.
I didn't mean like words for just words, but like I didn't know if you wanted us, like if you take the audience example, like go in depth into all the breakdowns of students and this is this.
Yeah, I would say.
This is the SEL person, this is their SPA, like that.
Yeah, it would be more if I would say the evidence would be more if I'm seeing things like that because they would impact your Powtoon,
Okay.
right? If you're making those connections and saying, I really need to consider how I shape this Powtoon because I know I've got 3 students that are this.
Okay.
But if it's just throwing out as much data as you can, just to throw out as much data as you can, and that data wouldn't really impact.
Some people we know are very data driven, and so that's why we want data for everything, which I hadn't been getting that vibe, but I also just didn't want to miss the boat either. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to do things just like you were saying. Don't do it just to say you did it, but like do it because that's what is impacting.
Yeah,
me
it's that
the
kind of.
most.
I mean, and you've all created rubrics, I'm sure, and you do always like struggle with
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Like, what language do I add on to that?
Yeah.
Like for the extra step, and then it's not like you're punishing anybody who's made it to the proficient level or whatever you happen to call that level. But you're always being asked, well, what's the adjective that you're going to add in that's going to take you to that advanced level?
I
Like,
think some of us
so.
in this room who might all teach in the same district have been slightly traumatized by verbiage on rubrics, so we probably are the people who should just stop talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
saying?
it's,
Agreed.
yeah.
I drilled in.
In fact, I was just thinking, as you said that, when I did the ID plan for the other class, when it was like, what's the need? I actually picked one of my EDT projects, grammar, because there's a need, because of data.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and
but that's kind of what I thought. So that I'm glad that we don't have to do that for this part. Like that doesn't have to be.
yeah,
data
no,
driven.
it's so. All right, so that's really the overview for the Powtoon project. So essentially a 3-week time frame with the focus over the first week being mainly the design, getting a good plan in place and a script and a segmentation, and then a couple of weeks to actually work on the execution of the plan. Beyond that, well, I guess while we're here, I may as well, because that is the bulk of the homework for next week. So there are a couple of forum things. One of them is about personalization principle. And that is, there's a chapter from the e-learning and the art of instruction book that is about personalization. The reason I'm bringing it up is because that is part of what animation and Powtoon gives us. That's maybe an advantage over just showing a series of slides in a PowerPoint that's just a bunch of text and images. So I do want to address that. So it's basically read the chapter, and then there's a basic prompt in a forum to post some thoughts about personalization. Then, and this is really about setting up really post the 26th, but I've got a prompt that just asks a couple basic questions about games and gamification. And I put this in the post, but I wanted to say it out loud as well, is essentially I want to find out what you would say sort of right now would be definitions or descriptions for games and gamification. I want you to resist the urge to go and look up a definition and give it, because we will get to that. I'm curious in just kind of finding out where your thoughts and conceptions are as they stand right now. So it's okay if they're off base. It's okay if they're not complete or whatever. I know some people, again, who maybe have the urge to always go that extra step are going to be like, well, I'm going to go look it up and do some research. And I really just kind of want to get a snapshot of what you know right now and think it may mean right now. And you may not know. You may not have a great answer for either one, but give it your best shot. And it's really more, it's kind of a pretest for me. It's like a formative assessment for me to see where people's thoughts are right now in terms of games and gamification. And then that lets me know a little bit better what holes to fill as we move forward or misconceptions to address as we move forward. So that is really kind of, this is a precursor to essentially the next 2/3 of the course. So those two things, and then the rest of it is basically what we were just talking about. So the Powtoon project ID, you may start to work on it if you think your ID plan is in good shape. The only other thing I threw up here, there are still a couple people, and honestly, off the top of my head, I don't remember who hadn't yet put in their thoughts for the selecting the game groups. There was a forum for last week that was due this week where people were just supposed to put in some thoughts about what they might want to do for a game. And I just want to make sure to have all of those responses in from everybody before I start looking at all of that and trying to collate
I only
what's.
responded. I didn't make my own post because a lot of people already said stuff. Is that okay?
I would still do a post of your own, even if it mirrors what other people are saying. Because what I try to do is I set up a little grid for myself and I put down what people said is their 3, and then I put down how many people or what people responded to those 3, and that way I can see, oh, it looks like 6 people all glommed onto this one idea. That looks like a really strong one, or nobody really responded to this one. So if I have an idea of where your thoughts are, I can use that, even if it does mirror some of the other things you've seen, because I look for that too. Yeah, so that's that in terms of next week. Read a chapter and a forum, and just show me what you think you know about games and gamification. Next week, we will talk about getting the group settled next week, and you will have an initial chance to just kind of sit down with each other and do some quick brainstorming about settling on a main idea for your game. We will also talk about the definition of a game next week. So I am going to take some of the information from your posts and we'll look at that. But I do also then plan on giving you some time next week also as lab time to continue to work on the Powtoon projects and so on. So that'll be,
We're really not gonna watch each other's Powtoons.
we can if you would like to.
They're only 30 seconds each.
Oh, you mean the mini projects?
Yeah, those little tiny ones that we did. We don't
Uh,
have to, that's not in your plan. That is just-
Yeah, I wasn't gonna, sometimes people don't want people to see their work if it's.
Oh, I don't
yeah.
care.
But, oh, look, if I, as I go through them now that it looks like most of them were submitted, I can pull out some
I'm just curious
examples to
about
look at. So,
I mean, I like
You-
that too, like, I mean, we can look at each other's Moodle. Like,
Yeah.
I still, from
Yeah.
last class, I would have really liked to have seen everybody's iBook.
Me too.
Yeah.
Same.
And I have a feeling like he'd begrudgingly, I shouldn't say that, but
yeah.
he said
Well,
he would download them for us.
I would
I'm
say
not so
that
sure
the-
how excited he really is.
Our actual Powtoon projects, I do tend to have a time where we get to look at those.
And
I just
that's
didn't know it's like the
something that we
mini
can
projects
keep,
because
right?
they're,
We download that, that's
yeah,
ours.
you can download it as a self-contained video
Okay.
file, or you can upload it to YouTube, and if you have a YouTube account, you can save them there too. But
It's not that crazy.
but-
It's it's not that good.
Yeah.
My 30 second one.
But yeah, we'll definitely look at those. I mean, again, the mini projects were less about sort of a finished product and more about giving people a chance to practice things. So I don't want to. But yeah, we can share out the others. So, all right. So it is a little after 6 o'clock. So basically, like I said, from here on out tonight, stay as long as you feel you need. If you think you've got everything you need and you're in good shape and you want to head out, you can head out. If you want to hang around for a while and get some work done, if you've got something to catch up on from a previous week and you want to get that out of the way now, and so you can move ahead with just stuff for next week, then I'm here as a resource, and the computers are here as a resource. So take the time that you need and enjoy.
I hear, I'll just.